But let's turn our attention to this Richard Hart interview on the Paul Barron Network. And I've watched some of Paul Barron's videos in the past. If you're not familiar with him, I think he's a little bit more like old school crypto, and he'll do a lot of videos. I know he's really interested in like some of the GameFi space, and I've seen him make like a GameFi portfolio with like 15 different GameFi tokens in it. And I just thought, wow, that's way more than I want to get into. But I will say this, high quality content in terms of like his studio and everything. I think he's a good interviewer and a good speaker and stuff. I frankly was surprised myself to see him welcome Richard Hart on. I know that his fans asked for it, which that doesn't surprise me. Right. But, well, I mean, watchers of Paul Barron Network requested it. But I told you, Ewok, I was surprised to see him on there because I've watched Paul Barron a couple of times over the last year. And I specifically, on multiple occasions, saw people within his chat asking about Hex and him literally scoffing at it and just kind of a dismissive, come on, guys, don't be buying Hex. And, you know, now he's interviewing Richard Hart. So everybody's allowed to kind of change their mind. I don't think that necessarily means Paul Barron is a 100% Hex allocation now, but it's good to see him talk to Richard anyway and see the light. And I think he was genuinely interested in a lot of Richard had to say, and understands that it's not just like the outfits and the, you know, PP talk and all that stuff, and that there's actually a lot of knowledge there. But let's go to the point that you were bringing up earlier, Ewok, and that was Richard saying, and we value kind of his opinion on Bitcoin because he's done so well calling prices in the past, but stating that he does not, of course, still believe that the lows are in. He gave thoughts on the Fed pivoting, which you were talking about earlier, is usually when the bottoms happen. And that this could last a little bit longer into 2023 because of that. So what was your impression of some of what Richard said here? And we talked a little bit about it earlier, but it was nice to hear him say that because that's kind of what I have been thinking and believing myself. So.
Well, right. And, you know, we kind of already covered it, but, you know, he said that the normal, when the Fed pivots like that, that's when you see the capitulation after the pivot. So not before, but after. So again, we've got a ways to go to get to that point. A couple more months of rate hikes, but you know that's what his point was, that usually when there is a pivot, the downturn in the market happens after, not before.
And another point that I had on that is he had also said. I'm losing my train of thought here. I'm trying to think of what I was going with. It was interesting because the way he said it, I was just trying to pay attention to the nuance, was that he said it in the way he was like, I'd be a lot more comfortable calling the bottom right now if this stuff wasn't also happening, which made me think that he gave a little wee bit more credence. I don't think he believes it primarily, but he gave a little bit more credence to the bottom potentially being in than he may have before. And I think that's probably a time thing because we are a month removed now from a full calendar year of being in the bear market. But yeah, look, I wanted to see that. Yeah, what was that comment? Go ahead and flash that back up there.
Well, Johnny said 6 to 8 months after the pivot is what he said. I didn't think it was quite that long, but you know, Johnny Chaos knows his stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if he meant it as far as a bottom or if he meant like the start of the market turning around. I'll have to actually check that out again. You know, somebody I want to call out actually that is a Hexakin, and frankly, I had never heard of him before, and I sent you the stream of Crypto Coffee and him the other day. Yeah, I love Crypto 7. His stuff is so good, and he does this awesome thing where, and I think it's better than a lot of other folks I've seen, where he kind of breaks down Richard's streams or interviews and really calls out nuances like that. I just watched his stream today where he was talking about some of that. He does a really, really good job kind of looking at the nuance of some of those streams that Richard is on. So shout out to Crypto 7. I'm definitely a fan.
Yeah, that was a good stream with him and Coffee as well. So
very good. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Had a little bit of technical difficulty somewhere in there, but yeah, it was definitely really, really good. So shout out to Crypto 7 there too. And speaking of him, this is what I kind of wanted to get into a little bit more. What he was talking about today was the idea of the 4-year cycles, which again, Bob Lucas, you can find him on Twitter. It's Loukas. He likes to hate on Hex quite frequently. I think whenever he wants attention or something. I'm not really sure. But he is a big proponent and the creator, actually, of the Bitcoin 4-year cycle. And he references them a lot, talks about them a lot. And Richard, I think, is a believer in them and has gone by them in the past. What I want to ask you, Ewok, is, we've been talking about the 4-year cycle from a Bitcoin perspective here a lot, but I want to get your thoughts. The thumbnail of tonight's episode is, does Hex front run the market? And that's what we're going to get to right now. Richard would never, should never, can't ever, and Crypto 7 was talking about this today, is not going to come out and say the Hex bottom is in.
Right.
That would be a massive violation. He'd be in a lot of trouble. He knows
Sure.
not to say that. But we heard from pretty good sources. I don't know why he would lie, but Miguel, Dollar Cost Crypto, whenever Richard did come to the States there back in the early fall, I think it was like September, October, him and Miguel were hanging out. And it sounded like from Miguel that maybe over some bar talk or whatever, Richard kind of thought that the bottom for Hex was in at about 2.8 cents or something at the time. Now, we have gone slightly below that cents. Again, right now we're sitting a little bit below 2.5 cents. But I think for Richard to confidently enough say that, and knowing that he believes in 4-year cycles, that would mean that he thinks we're kind of past the blood in the streets phase of this year in terms of Hex anyway. And maybe now we're into the accumulation and, still confidently feeling that the bottom is in. I know there's a lot of Hex people out there that are waiting for sub 2-cent Hex and aren't going to buy again until it gets there, or want a penny and a half. And who knows, you may get it, but I have not behaved like I'm waiting for it, and I'm not going to behave like I'm waiting for it. So
you might get it, but you also might get left behind because the way the Hex chart can move one candle and it's gone.
Forever.
It forever. It only takes one whale to purchase a couple $1 million, and whoever's waiting for 2 cents is getting left behind. It's happened before. The very first upcycle that we had, it happened several times where people were waiting for a pullback. They got a small one, and then just another crazy buy candle just put it up to new all-time levels. So I wouldn't wait around. And you're right. Richard can't say things like that. He could get himself in a lot of trouble. But that's what we're here for, to say that, we can say it. We can say it. It's not gonna hurt anything, but other than saying not financial advice. But I think we've pretty much bottomed out. You might see a couple dips here and there. Somebody just, decides to dump 10 or 12 million for shits and giggles, or because they're tired of waiting on PulseChain. And to answer Stizzy Jones' question, what are the chances of Pulse not releasing in 2023? I think all of 2023, if it doesn't happen, very slim to none. I don't think
I'd be surprised. Yeah, I would be surprised.
If it doesn't launch next year, there's going to be some very upset people.
There already are too. So yeah. But I saw whatever, I don't know what her name is totally, but Hivid Hex. I know you know who I'm talking about on Twitter. She tweeted something today that was an interesting thought that I didn't really think of, but basically how obviously there's so many people, just to do a quick detour on PulseChain, that are upset that it isn't out by now, and definitely thought it would be out by now. Think if it did come out earlier this year, like in May, which I know was a big month that people were thinking, like May to June. What would we be thinking right now? I mean, the market, let's just pick May, because that's what a lot of people thought. Well, we saw Bitcoin absolutely tank in June, and the rest of the market just totally tank, like just the worst thing ever by June. And then you thought it couldn't get much worse. It gets way worse recently in the fall with FTX and everything. So if PulseChain sits here now having a shelf life of 6 months or so already, I mean, people aren't exactly like super happy at this moment still, I don't think. I mean, like it'd be more bullish maybe than not having it, but I mean, like it just feels more optimal that it launches more around this territory, right?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think also it could be the catalyst for the start of the bull. It could bring enough excitement and new investors into it to trigger everything else. but we've got to have that other stuff happen first.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
we got to have the final capitulation to get down there. I don't want. Hopefully, it's not battling each other. You got one going up and you got one going down, and it's just kind of fighting each other back and forth. I want everything to capitulate down,
Yeah.
realize, get our bottom, and then we can kind of move on and go from there. But
That's the
yeah,
exact.
I think
Yeah.
May is a good target. I think if we get testnet version 3 in January sometime, I was hoping by Christmas, but it seems that they're pretty close with some of the updates that I've seen out there.
We're going to get there shortly. Yeah. I want to cover
Yeah,
that tweet Richard sent. Yeah.
but I mean, I think we could be looking at January release for that, and if everything goes well and they don't find any major bugs in the month or two, maybe 3, then we're looking April, May even for that launch. So we'll see what happens, but it's positive. It's
Mhm.
one day closer than it was yesterday.
Yeah. I want to ask you, kind of finishing off on the 4-year cycle idea with Hex and Bitcoin. So obviously the Hex, and this is what we're talking about with Hex front running the market. I mean, it's indisputable at this point that Hex's bear market really started after the top of 56 cents in September of 2021.
Right, right.
Obviously, Bitcoin was not till November. So that's a full 60 days, which is, Bob Lucas is also a big 60-day cycle guy. So 60 days is also an interesting number as far as days and cycles. So now that we sit here in December of 2022, with the wiggle room of, understand that there's not total exactness in these cycles and in these projections. Yeah, it would make a lot of sense that Hex has now moved on to the phase after the initial bloodbath and is now more towards the accumulation phase. And we may
Yep.
not see, even a 50% dip from here on out. Like we might just be in that accumulation phase. And it was at 3 cents and 3.5 cents for so long. Now we took almost a 50%, not quite, but almost a 50% haircut from that 3.5 cent range. So,
Right.
you've got those prices right now. We could be in that accumulation phase already for Hex and never go below 2 cents. I think that people, it does kind of remind me of some of those other times where like in Hex, I think because a lot of people might have been there since the beginning and expect the worst with a lot of lows and stuff like that. I think that there might just be more propensity for them to think that there's going to be penny Hex than maybe people thinking like 9K Bitcoin. It just seems like they're more wired for like what they could scoop up.
Well, I think, the one thing, the beauty is that there aren't really many Bitcoin Hex trading pairs anywhere.
Yeah.
So the Bitcoin price won't really affect it. Now, that being said, there are a lot of Bitcoin Ethereum pairs. So Bitcoin will bring down Ethereum. There are some Hex Ethereum pairs. But the majority of the liquidity is still tied with USDC, which is a good thing. So I don't see that final capitulation for Bitcoin. When that happens, I don't see it hurting the Hex price too awful bad. We might
Right.
get a dip down, but again, still think there's so many limit orders set in those 1.5, 1.8 cent range that if it does dip that low, it gets bought up immediately. So it
Yeah.
won't stay there, and I'm pretty sure we have hit a floor at least anyway.
I think you're right. I think that 1.8 to 2 cent range is kind of like the 10K range for BTC. I just think that there's such a huge wall there of support that we probably won't see below that. We absolutely could, but I think it would be a strange scenario and only like very, very quickly or something like that. So, I mean, yeah, if you want to wait for that and set a limit order, that's totally fine, but just be prepared that it's not going to get filled. And I personally would still want to be getting into the market in the meantime, so that's where we're looking at Hex in terms of the 4-year cycle. So,